Welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast, where we address the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. This is the time, my friends, for a deeper renewal of your Christian vocation. Come and enter into the freedom of Christ that allows you to be the person you were created to be, because there's an amazing, awesome, exciting next season of life waiting for you. Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast. You're here with Curtis and Karen Herbert.
Hi, everybody.
We are happy to be here with you today. Curtis, do we have a listener comment today?
A listener texted me and said, by the way, I love your podcast. It's really inspired me.
Wow, that's very encouraging.
Yeah, so that's nice. And we're always happy to hear from people, and a little encouragement or sharing your thoughts or experiences. It's always very welcome, and we're very interested to hear from you. And Karen, I did a breakthrough session recently, I think, as you know.
Oh, I do know. Yes. So listeners, breakthrough sessions are things that we use as coaches to really dig into a particular area of life and do all of the requisites for change that we talk about here on the Catholic Midlife podcast. So as coaches, we do our own client work, as it were.
Yeah, we were doing the breakthrough session. And so I was on the receiving end of this. And at a certain point in that session, I was sharing my values around a certain area. So the area of life was career and work. And by that, I mean my professional work outside of the family.
I would be interested, Curtis, in hearing some of your values because I don't actually know what they are.
Yeah, well, I can share some of those, and I'll share some, Karen. And this area of life right now, it simply means the things that I'm looking for in my next big activity.
Okay.
And that's a little different than, say, if you ask me, well, what's important about career and work, or what's important about the workplace, or what are the values that a company needs to have? These are all different discussions. But right now, the values for what it is I'm trying to do in my work is, here's a few of them.
Okay.
Purpose, helping, impact, collegiality, flexibility, using talents, and interesting.
Oh, very nice. I love those.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting, Karen. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Exactly.
Unless it were just brute necessity. Now, my homework is to bring more definition to these values. And that was not all of them, but that was some of them. To bring more definition, what does this really mean to me? And what do I mean by those things?
Oh, yeah, that's super important because just those words can mean different things to any individual person. And yeah, they're going to mean something very specific to you. There's going to be something those words stand for.
I'll try to do that for some of these values. I think that'll be interesting.
Oh, I'd love to know. Yeah.
And I want to encourage our listeners to try to become familiar with your values in different areas of life, because these are going to help you make great decisions if you can articulate your values. And there's a number of ways to elicit them, and it's not so obvious how you do it. It's not as easy as just sitting down and making the list, but you could start there by sitting down and making a list. And then the trick with that approach is to sit with them and to think about what they mean, and to watch yourself as time passes and to see, okay, what is it that is really guiding me in making this choice? Or what is it about what's making this decision so hard? Do I have competing values? Because that's often what can happen to us is we make ourselves crazy because we can't honor all our values in a particular situation sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we just don't even appreciate, Curtis, how deeply rooted our values are, how deeply they program us and motivate us to make certain decisions and to live in certain ways. And if you don't know what they are, then there's a whole level of your own motivation and behavior that you just don't understand. There's so much a part of what we want, what we desire, what we shoot for, what we spend our time on, what we spend our money on, what we prioritize, what we put our energy into. That all comes back to what are we valuing in this particular situation.
That's right, Karen. That's really true. There are so many reasons to get a handle on where you're at with the values. I thought it would be interesting to talk about some of these values that I mentioned, and maybe it would help our listeners think about, well, what values are they pursuing in their current career, or however it is you define making your contribution outside the house.
Okay, Curtis. Well, I know that you said the word purpose. I'm curious what that means to you.
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I know I used this word a lot during the breakthrough session at a certain point, saying how important this was to me in my work. And now being asked to define it, that's not easy. I think purpose, maybe the language is letting us down a little bit. I think it exists at a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I think of my purpose on earth is living my Genesis vocation in the kingdom of God in the world today.
Right.
That's how I see myself and what it is I'm trying to do. It's like the telos of man. Mm-hmm. Like the acorn is going to become the oak tree. It's living into its telos, which is its goal, the goal it's made for. Like birds got to fly, right? So that's our human telos, more or less. That's how I'm thinking about it these days. So purpose in work that's not really what I'm getting at. I want something that has alignment with that, yet it doesn't have to provide all those things.
Sure. Maybe it's just a little more specific or a way that it's showing up in this area.
Yeah. So really, for purpose in my work, I want to help people and make an impact and use my talents.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm talking about when I say I want purposeful work.
I think this is an interesting word that our listeners could sit with for a while, even if perhaps, they didn't pick it as one of their top values, but even just trying to give it a definition of what it would mean to them is kind of an interesting exercise.
Well, it's a funny word, so you did that on purpose.
Yeah.
What's your purpose here?
Yeah. It can have a lot of different layers of meaning.
Is there any point to this? Is there no purpose here? So it's an interesting word, yeah.
So when I did one of my breakthrough sessions on physical health, one of my values was sunshine.
Sunshine.
Yes, which might not sound like, kind of an abstract value, but it's really important to me. And it kept coming up. And then I look at the things that I really am drawn to, and that's a huge one. I'll always go out and sit in the sun. I love to go to the beach and just soak up the rays. Now you could be like, well, maybe you're just vitamin D deficient because you live in Minnesota, but I've always been like that. I've always there's something about the sunshine that fills me up. So that's another example of one that's maybe a little offbeat, but is very true for me.
Well, it is true. And I have noticed that you go sit in the sun. It really does something for you.
Right.
And you can go to the beach and you can sit there a long time.
It's true.
But I've got to get up. I got to go do something in the water or whatever it is. But you're just like some little turtle.
Yes, I am.
There.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's really,
I'm glad you didn't say
very
lizard.
interesting.
I think I'll be a turtle instead.
Turtles are cute. So there's been a lot of unconscious behavior on your part.
Right.
Just being drawn to it.
Yes.
Like, well, where do you want to go? Let's go to the beach, Karen. Oh, yeah, that sounds nice. Let's do that. How is articulating that as a value? Do you think that's going to show up differently for you now?
Well, I think what it helped me appreciate was that, it's okay for me to prioritize that. I don't have to feel bad about taking a break to go sit in the sun. And when you get up to go play in the water, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm just so lazy sitting here. I should get up and be in the water. I could be like, wow, look at how much sunshine I'm getting. This is amazing. I'm really going to enjoy this time and honor it. And so it's almost like allowing yourself to have that as a value and get yourself what you need.
Very interesting. Now, sometimes values can be toward and sometimes they can be away.
What do you mean by that?
So toward means it's a value that's pulling me forward. It's inspiring me. And the away can be almost like an avoidance goal. It's something I want to get away from. So for instance, predictability in work. It has to be interesting, but too much chaos is not good. So I want some predictability. So in my mind, predictability, it's about half towards and half away as a value. Like, whoa, I don't want that chaos, man.
Oh, right.
Don't want that. How about a little bit of predictability?
Yeah. So the same word could maybe be different for each person, but for you, there's some toward and away in that word.
Yeah, that's right. And in a lot of ways, your values are what they are, and they are what you observe yourself doing. And it can be good to distinguish between aspirational values and actual values.
This is true. Many people, when they're eliciting their values, are talking about values they'd like to have versus values that are actually reflected in their behavior. And that's a very common mistake.
Yeah, and values they're good things. Even if sometimes we're avoiding something, it's because it's good. We're not talking about the negative kind of bad habits and sorts of things.
Yeah, the nice thing about knowing and expressing, and as you're saying, Curtis, defining what these value-laden words mean is then you can bring them with you into your area of life, and you can intentionally allow them to form what it is you're doing. And when you're aligned with your values, it's like you could tell. I mean, this is part of what I think we mean by the word integrity, that here's this person who knows who they are and what's important to them and is going to show up out of that in the areas of their life.
There's a couple things about being in alignment with your value. One is that's how you get your strongest action. It's going to be when you're in congruence, because there's going to be less of the baggage stuff holding you back when your values are lining up for you.
Yeah.
And there's another point that is also important, and that is that so often we're not actually acting out of our values. We're acting out of necessity, or what's the word? When it's kind of, expediency.
Yes.
Or we're just reacting.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on and we're just dealing with it. We're making choices, and that's not living your most powerful life, because when you're not honoring your important values and you're doing what's expedient, then you're going down a road and it's not going to really be the place that God intended for you.
Yeah. And we're not talking here, I don't think, Curtis, about broader cultural values or even the kind of moral values that we hear talked about in a broader sense. Really, these are your personal values. It's how you show up in those areas.
Right. Well, this is a good example. The physical health is your example. You have a list of things that are important to you, that you think are important, and that's what we're talking about. Or there's things in your work that are important. So I invite listeners to think about an area of life. Say it's work, your work outside the home. Think about your values in this area. So purpose, helping, impact, collegiality, flexibility, using talents, interesting, had some more values: connection, confidence, serenity, personal growth. Money's in there. It's kind of far down the list. We should do something about that, maybe.
We should. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. So I just invite people to think about their list of values.
For sure, Curtis. And obviously, this is something that we do quite a bit with our clients, is digging in and discovering those values and aligning them and trying to get to that congruency. And anyone can do this. You can totally get started on your own and identifying what's important to you and getting a little bit at the root of what that means, offering your own kind of definition and getting some clarity around that. So yeah, I really invite listeners to give it a try.
Yeah, it'll pay off for you if you stay with it and push it along, make it work, or you could get a little coaching and take the fast track and bring it into focus quickly.
Yes. Yeah. What I would say don't do is make a list of 10 words, be like, okay, that's nice, put them in a file folder and not do anything with them, because that's not going to help you at all. That's not going to really inform in a powerful way the choices that you make and the progress that you make in your own personal development.
Brevity is a value for many people, Karen. So let's just wrap it up. I thought this was kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And I invite listeners to jump into the Facebook group and share one of their values.
Ooh,
or their
I'd
thoughts
love
about
to
values.
hear that. Yes.
Or
I
a
would
list
love to hear
or whatever you've got. And if you're not in our Facebook group, you simply go to Facebook and type in the Catholic Midlife Podcast, and you will find us there. We'd be happy to push the button that says, join us. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being here with us. The Catholic Midlife Podcast is for anyone that wants to receive the abundance of life that God has for each one of us. Take a moment right now to tell a friend about us.